So today we are going to be talking all about story, photographic stories, how to tell one, and how I personally like to go about doing it. When I first started photography in my preliminary stages, I would hear a lot of people, particularly YouTubers, talk about the importance of photographic stories and how your photos have to tell a story, but I never felt like I really understood what story they were trying to tell, and I always felt like theirs was kind of a collection of images that they kind of threw together and left for interpretation. In my opinion, that is not necessarily a story, and I didn't realize it later until I started working on a lot of my own short stories and a lot of my own films and projects and started trying to come around getting some kind of concepts or ideas to express. And I want to share those with you guys because I think they would have been very helpful to me if I had heard them from someone when I was first starting out, and then maybe it could cause some room for discussion. So if you guys are more experienced storytellers, then perhaps you can leave some of your tips or ideas or thoughts down below. I think they will help a lot of people as well. I myself am just an amateur photographer. I'm no experienced storyteller or professional writer or anything like that. These are just things that I like to think about and have helped me along my journey and could potentially help you. So take what I say, obviously, with a grain of salt. There's just how I think about it. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started. The first point or concept that I want to start with is that story comes from you, not just a collection of photos. This kind of builds on what I slightly mentioned earlier, when I feel like a lot of photographers would just put their best photos together, throw them together into a photo book or something like that, call it a story, and leave it for interpretation. That, in my opinion, is not how you would go about telling a story. Then what you're doing is you are kind of being lazy about it. You're kind of leaving things up for interpretation. You're putting your best work there that don't necessarily have any connection with each other. They don't necessarily make sense over what you're trying to express, and you're telling people to kind of make do with that stuff. I think this is kind of a half-baked way of going about it, because when you're trying to tell a story, you want to express a certain concept or idea that has come to your mind. What this means is that a lot of your best work aren't particularly going to have any connection with each other. Just because something looks good doesn't mean it belongs in a zine with something else that looks good, but doesn't necessarily express the same kind of feeling or emotion that the other one would have. So it's important to remember that the story comes from you, not the photo itself. Very rarely and very occasionally, we will get one or two really good photos that's able to express some kind of concept or idea all on its own. But those are very rare, and those come maybe like once or twice a year, and those aren't kind of works we can force. A lot of the times you can make do with a lot of images that don't necessarily have to be your best work because they share the same relationship or they share the same concept or idea. And that's it. The cool part about photography and storytelling is that a lot of bad photos can actually become good photos because they're being used to express a certain body of work or idea. And that is, in essence, what storytelling is, in my opinion. And this brings us into the next point that I want to make, is connecting and sequencing photos. Storytelling is oftentimes done through a lot of different ways, but one of the ways we can express and tell a story is by the way we sequence and connect photos. So I've come up with a few different short stories on my website, andrepel.com. I've been trying to write as much as I can, and I'm working on a few short films and short stories for my Euro trip, which is going to take a while because it takes some time. But the ones I published recently were about a trip I went on in San Francisco a long time ago with a few other friends, and I had to think deeply about what I wanted to express. So one of the short stories is called Top of the Hill or something like that. And I don't want to spoil everything about these short stories, but I'll give you kind of a brief example on what I was getting at. Some of these photos I wouldn't deem as my best photos, but the way I sequenced it was in a way to express what I was feeling. The point of this short story was to create some sort of idea about how I felt about the day and how we were going about the day, and just how free and mystical the whole experience kind of felt, climbing to the hill, overcoming barriers that we had present in the day, which was generally just laziness and whatnot. And I think that was overall what I was trying to express with the story. And I think some of the images I used weren't necessarily the best ones out of the day, but they were necessary to progress that kind of story along. This also brings me into my next point, is that your story doesn't have to be anything grandeur, anything big, anything crazy. You can start with a simple, small concept or idea. For example, you can make even a storybook about just your particular color, the way it makes you feel, what it makes you express, something like that. Obviously, if you are a documentary photographer or something like that, you'll have something bigger You'll have something important, you'll have something real life story that you are documenting along the way in some other country or something like that. But for 99% of us, we are just amateur photographers doing this for fun, but we still have a story to tell as well. And who's to say that your story or my story is more important than one or another? It's just different. It's just a different story, but I would recommend starting small, starting with a single concept that you resonate with, and then adding photos that help express that along the way. That's the best way to go about telling a story. Start simple, start small. The next thing I want to talk about is a very important part that I feel like a lot of photographers struggle with, mainly because we are photographers ourselves. And that is writing and using text, using copy to help express yourself. When it comes to a photo book or a photo zine, it's important to have a lot of photos, of course, but it can't just be all photos because then it's a picture book. I think we all have a unique voice, a unique way of expressing ourselves, a unique way of writing that other people don't have, and it's important to include that in the photo book or the photo zine to help express or tell the point. It's kind of like that show Don't Tell. We can write in a way that allows our reader to get some context of what we're trying to get at, but not tell them all the answers, so they have something to work towards. They have something to work for, and it's more compelling and more engaging for the reader. So it's important to start writing. It doesn't have to be any lengthy novel. You don't have to write anything crazy like that. Even just a title can give a reader enough context to have something to link in towards. Does that make sense? So I would recommend start writing, using copy, implementing that into your storytelling, sequencing those with your photos, and that's how you get more of a story. It also helps you explain your work as a photographer. I feel like when photographers just leave their pictures there, put all their pictures together and make a picture book, what they're doing is they're leaving a lot of things for interpretation, which is okay in some instances, but as photographers, we got to be able to explain our work. We have to have a voice in our storytelling, or else then we don't have much of a story at all. Does that make sense? It's kind of my take on it. I know a lot of photographers can be very good at expressing what they're trying to express with just the photo itself, but like I said, those really, really good photos come once every while. If you really want to be able to explain your work and tell a story, you got to be able to use some sort of text and be able to understand when to use text and when not to use text. I don't think you have to use text all the time, but knowing how to use it is very important for those situations where you do have to use it. Does that make sense? The next point I want to address is that story takes time. The reason why I didn't publish these short stories was because I had to have something to say, and it takes time to be able to think about what you want to say about a certain experience or concept or idea, and then gather the source material to plant with it. So my recommendation for this is to be patient. Understand that stories take time, and I do a lot of vlogs and whatnot on this channel, and those are a bit easier to do on a weekly basis, and I get to bring you guys along with me. But as for zines and photo books, I'm trying to make at least 1 or 2 a year. The reason why the frequency is so low is because these things take time, which is why the Euro trip is kind of held off, and which is why the recent short stories I published are like over a year late or so. But it's important to take your time and be patient with it, because that's how you get the kind of result that you want. That's how you make better quality stories, is by being more patient with it, making sure that everything is refined and detailed, and expressing exactly what it is, the concept or idea that you want to express. The final point that I want to make is that photos are a means or a medium of expressing the story, but they are not the story itself. Most of the photos are going to be mediums for you to tell whatever concept or idea you're trying to push forward. And this is what I actually like a lot about photography, is that you can put a lot of images together that seemingly have no correlation or connection, but they are connected by the way you are putting them together, sequencing together, and the concept or idea the whole book is about. That is a better way to tell a story, in my opinion, because it allows you as the photographer, the artist, to be more expressive on something that you are doing. I think that taking a photo, whether it's good or bad, and just leaving it up there for interpretation without any kind of underlying connection to something deeper is kind of a lazy thought or idea to me. But maybe I'm more inexperienced in that sense, and maybe my photos just aren't good enough to be able to do that stuff. Who knows? I don't know. In my opinion, I think that the author, the photographer, has to be the one telling the story. I like having a hand in the story. That's why. I know some other photographers like to just be an observer and let the story kind of come out of what they're expressing. The point is just to have something to say and to express it. That is all a story is. That's nothing more, nothing less. As long as you're able to achieve those two things, then, well, you have a story. So keeping things simple for that kind of last point, I guess. Anyways, hopefully some sort or some part of this video made sense. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. If you have any tips on what has helped you progress and tell your story, because these tips are just things that are helping me with my writing and my storytelling and my photography, please leave your thoughts and your ideas down below, because I know everyone thinks about it slightly differently. So take my words with a grain of salt, of course. And if you haven't yet, please go check out my short stories that I published on drpel.com. Hopefully they'll be somewhat of an enjoyable read for you guys. Anyways, if you like this video, please like the video down below, subscribe to this channel for more stuff, and I'll see you guys, of course, in another video. Thanks as always for watching. Peace.